I think regulation is incredibly important, right, for this sector to really become mainstream.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions that I'm seeing on the chat box are really about trust.
Yes.
No one questions. No one has the same question about a small case or a grow or a Zerodha, because their products are ultimately very regulated, right? And that's the way it should be.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in a lot of spaces and a lot of times, regulation will follow rather than lead, because there will be innovation that regulation will then come to make sure that the right guardrails. In my view, there seems to be a lot of action that seems to suggest that the RBI and SEBI are definitely for promoting access to such new investment options among a larger base of users. There have been certain steps, including modifications to the P2P policy, which have allowed larger investment sizes, different kinds of investments. We've heard about growing acceptance for crypto, even from a regulatory perspective. The government has made certain changes in terms of the ticket size for public offerings, which have reduced the minimum lot size that you can invest in. Most importantly, markets outside India, US, Europe, Western markets, have seen this regulation come in place to the extent that someone can really fractionalize and democratize investments across the spectrum. And there's a SEBI paper dating back to 2014, which talks about how this could be brought into India with the right structure or the right framework in place. So a lot of the signs are right. Regulation does take time, and it should take time because it impacts a lot of people. But if I was to say which, to answer your question, the direction of the wind, it's definitely for regulation to come in as an enabler rather than as a disabler to this industry.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just add on my points. I mean, rightly said with Nikhil, right? I think the direction is in the right angle in multiple ways. I can speak more from RBI and SEBI as two regulators as an example. Like RBI had its Innovation Sandbox program, through which video KYC, which is now a phenomenon, something which RBI took it back then and said, yeah, this is something new, let's take it up. P2P lending is also one classic example for that matter, right? How they've grown from a small ticket size to now, I think 50 lakhs is the limit one can invest, etc. also at the same time. So, but then one thing is there's a growing trend for financialization of all types of securities, right? Like nobody earlier thought, okay, Strata aisa kuch karega, grip to do something like this, your regulator, and let's start creating laws around it, right? So, always startups are way ahead of regulation, and regulation always plays catch up, right? That's how it is. Like whether it's online pharma or what Dream11 is doing, etc. Right? Then no laws are still creating, like in spite. Last week, GST laws around Zomato and Swiggy food delivery also came in. So proactively, regulators, unfortunately in India, are more reactive rather than proactive. And if they could be only not in Bombay, but be in cities like Gurgaon and Bangalore today, sit with the ecosystem, create products around it, or at least understand what is the need of the hour, etc., and look at the larger picture, I think a lot of things can change. But I think regulators work only with players to make sure the interests of the investors are taken care of. That's prima facie, and I can speak because as a part of one of the policy making with the government of India when I was practicing law, and they went to all the incumbents and to who are existing. Okay, now you tell me what you want and how can this industry grow, but at the same time I want to protect everyone's interest, right? So regulators would work with you, take feedback from you, because end of the day they want this ecosystem to grow rather than it curb down completely, unless it's something which is against the interest of the larger audience in itself, right? So regulators are great. Nikhil brought out a very important point earlier, that why it is important for regulation is one bad apple can spoil the entire industry. And with whatever we are trying to do in a good way, institutionally with proper corporate governance, one thing can spoil it out in a larger way, and the entire industry itself can take for a toss out.